people would say, oh, we were never a people, we didn't know architecture, we owned no schools, we owned no knowledge of our own, yet they could steal our blueprints for like construction projects. So which means before colonization, we were a people with a mind of our own, with values of our own, with tradition, customs, administration, health, and education of our own. First of all, I'm a mother. I'm a mother of a beautiful daughter. She's 6 years now. And second of all, I think I look at myself as a global citizen first, so which means I'm the gatekeeper to humanity. And then I look at myself as someone from Seoul, a proud and Seoul girl. Popularly, I'm an activist, and my activism is focused on social justice. So if you're doing something wrong somewhere, know that I'm coming after you. That's basically what my activism is around. And also, I'm the founder of CC House of Fame, which is an organization that has an incredible pool of talent that is supporting the African continent to emerge victorious, to reclaim, to be reawakened, and, to get back their glory and be where we want Africa to be. Deciding to work on restitution, the return of artifacts and objects and items as now called by the European, and of course cultural heritage as we know it in Africa. I think that decision was more of a mission to me. If I had the choice, I would be sleeping right now, but I have to work. So it is more of like a mission to me. I started working on restitution back in 2018, but before then, I think my motivation came from the fact that I felt like I wasn't finding self as an individual. I had been a victim of multiple identity crises. Coming from the Anglophone region, I grew up in the Anglophone region. I studied there, I lived there, I experienced life there. And when I came to the French region, it was really like a total snap. It was a total cultural shock, which again was totally shocking to me because normally I've traveled a couple of countries around the world, and I think the worst cultural shock I've had is in my own country, where I'm considered like a second-class citizen. I remember I was in a market at Mendong, and I was crossing the road, and then a taxi comes from the wrong side of the road and almost hits me. And everyone is insulting me like, regardez-moi les anglophones. So I was like, okay, I think in the culture that I grew up in, no one would look at a human being to be less important than they are. No one would consider that, there is another class of humanity that is better off the class that we all have experienced. So all of that really got me thinking, like, who am I when I'm not an Anglophone, for example? Who am I when I'm not in a French system of education? Who am I when all these colonial legacies are like taken off me? And again, growing up with my grandfather who was a pastor, I also just grew up knowing that I was a child of God. And that is not in any disrespectful way, but I did not know myself as a person. So if Christianity was taken off me, if all these things that came into Africa just after a period of time and influenced and changed how Africans live, if they were not there, who would I be? So in 2018, I started a research program through Phil, just to again reconnect to my roots. And in the process, I got to learn about Gonzo from my grandfather. And when I spoke with my grandfather, I think at the time he was about 76, 77. And he told me that he really wanted to see Gonzo come back before he passes on. And that touched me so deeply. I felt like this was his dying wish. So I promised him that I was going to do my best, and that's how I got into the journey of restitution. And now it's no longer about Gonzo. It's no longer about Seoul. It's no longer about Cameroon. It's now more about Africa. And again, it's more about the question of justice. How do we as Africans get justice for the injustices that were done to us? And I think they still exist up till today. I think that the work that I do and the person that I am and what I'm passionate for and the skills that I have, they blend somehow in the end. Because you see, in my activism, I've used photography. In my activism, I've used different forms of multimedia productions. In my activism, you know, the humanitarian part of me, the experience I've had in the humanitarian field, it plays as well. So everything put together, I think it plays out very well for me. Photography for me is a way of expression. I'm able to express myself. I just feel very fulfilled when I'm capturing moments and, you know, transforming ordinary events into unforgettable moments and things like that. Why I'm very keen about photography is also the potential that visual storytelling brings to the question of restitution. There is a thing that you hear that, for example, Germany committed a lot of crimes in Namibia, but when you get to look at the images, that's what we have left of that memory. We did not leave it, but then photography plays a very key role in, you know, reenacting the moment, helping us to connect with a past that we were really never a part of, but we're interested in confronting. One of my projects I plan to do is to do like collective memory through the lens of the colonizers, like digging out old photographs, from what perspective they took the photographs as colonizers, what was our story in the photographs, as well as the victims of colonization. So it's something that I'm very keen on doing, and I hope I get to really do it. And I mean, there's something that I found very, very important in archives. It was like a blueprint for the South Royal Palace that was actually looted during the colonial times. And so it goes again to defend the fact that people would say, oh, we were never a people, we didn't know architecture, we owned no schools, we owned no knowledge of our own. Yet they could steal our, you know, our blueprints for like construction projects. So which means photography can help to establish the fact that before colonization, we were a people with a mind of our own, with values of our own, with tradition, customs, administration, health, and education of our own. I think sometimes there's always a complexity of linking the work we do as restitution to the daily lives of individuals in Cameroon, for example. But it's quite easy to show the impact of the work we do, for example, with Sports for Development, which is also, we work on indigenous games. We want to be able to revive the past games that children played for solidarity, the games that they played for social cohesion, the games that they played to learn team spirit, to be, you know, positively competitive. Those kind of games that were played in school, the Tabala, the CISO, these are games that we're trying to revive as an organization in the local communities, especially in the Northwest region affected by the armed conflict. And so what we do, for example, as prizes, we give scholarships to the best players for the next year. We give them books, we give them bags. We basically set them up for the next year. But I think most importantly for me is the fact that it has a gender lens as well. I think indigenous game is the only form of sport that there is no gender bias that for us. So we find the boys and the girls, you know, they play the same games. We find the teachers being interactive as part of the games. The teachers are basically the multiplicators because they learn and then they organize these games. And then when you look at other projects of ours, like the Women in Field, definitely I don't need to go far. When you look at this space, Glenn is behind the camera, and if there was someone to touch the lights, it would be a lights man. If there was someone maybe to operate another camera, it would be another cameraman. So the disparity that we have in the film industry, another sound man, from terminology, exactly, thank you. From terminology to how the spaces are built, there is a huge gender disparity. I just completed my master's thesis, and for example, in key roles that we consider that are, you know, creative and decision-making, such as screenwriting, directing, and producing, you basically have a weird, strange proportion of men to women. You have something like, okay, now when you look at things like sound, lights, the proportion is just 100 to 0. As in, Out of 103, participants in the survey, we just had completely zero women who were in sound and light. And so what we seek to do is to really support women in filmmaking, not just to support them to gain skills, to integrate and compete at the same level with men, but we want to support them by also celebrating them. If you look at the different award ceremonies and festivals, the few women who are doing things that just dissipate in the midst of like the majority, the dominant male industry. And when you look at the women, you easily, in Cameroon film, you easily pick the name Stephanie Toom, you pick Cindy Amade, Laura Unyama, and then you begin to scratch your head to think about the next woman in film. But if you go to the men, you would call the Jeffrey Epules, you would call a lot of names without thinking twice. So we want to create this equity that will lead to equality. So we want to support the women to grow, not necessarily to the same level as the men, but to also be recognized for their skills, to also create gender-sensitive spaces for filmmaking. When it comes to the Restitution project, when I started working in 2018, the government was never involved. I remember approaching a couple of government officials and they just laughed and said, well, you cannot bring Gonçalves back. It's the government that has to do that. And then I asked him if they show you two objects, object one and object two, will you be able to show me which one is Gonçalves and which one is not Gonçalves? And he just laughed and said, well, all the noise you're making, we don't think it's going to work. That if the government is not involved, it's not going to, the return is not going to happen. We are also quite aware that a couple of restitution requests from Gonçalves did pass through the Cameroon government. There is no accountability or paper trail for what was really done, like an action that was taken, because the museum in Germany never got the restitution request from the government. And sometimes these museums also lie. Maybe they did. We never know. But I would say that now that we have a decision unexpectedly and unbelievably by the government, there is now the supposed interest of the government and the involvement of the government in restitution. And I totally get it that, okay, Gonçalves has crossed from Cameroon to Germany, and it now involves international relations between states. But I worry to what extent the government should be involved in restitution. The government is this big entity who has a huge strategy, an englobing strategy for all communities. But then we are just one cube of sugar, So how do you begin to synchronize the fact that we have a decision and they are ready to return Gonçalves, but then the government wants to join in with other cases and make this huge ceremonial return of each object or at least one object from at least 4 regions. So when it comes to restitution, I also think the government is struggling, and I say this without mincing words. They are struggling. They've never had to receive returns in colonial context. It's the first time. Their Fuacom was looted. It had nothing to do with colonialism. The context was totally different. The negotiation process was different, and it came back. But now restitution is more complex. There is also a byproduct of restitution, which I call reparations, and which would also mean could be in some form of compensation, financial compensation. I worry that the government doesn't see that is important. I worry that the government wants to play the part of diplomacy, where everything has to be, set right and straightforward. And if anything out of what they think should happen, nothing should happen at all. Because I know that some communities negotiated a good deal. They negotiated a deal. I don't know how good it was, but they negotiated a deal with a German institution and community development. And at some point, the government came in and said, no, you have to stop. We cannot have people going to Germany and asking for tractors and asking for this and asking for this. I'm like, who asked the Europeans to come to Cameroon? Who gave them the permission? Nobody gave them the permission to come to Cameroon and loot our cultural object and kill our people and now we need permission to go to them. And so I feel like the government needs to do a lot of work on understanding how the conversation is also happening in other countries. Namibia has received objects. How did Namibia do it? What did they ask for? What are the challenges? So personally, if I'm receiving any support, financial support, of course, is a 0.0000 francs CFA. It's a huge no, and we all know that. Because to get basic funding, while we're still, like, our head office is in Bamenda, we tried to get some funding to do other projects from the Ministry of Arts and Culture. They basically tell us they don't fund projects. I don't know what that means. So throughout the restitution process, the government, if I have to put the government's support in clear words, I would say that there's too tall as an institution. And yeah, it's just that figure that stands and says, yes, I'm an institution that embodies, that is a global cover for different sub-communities. And so you have to pass through me to get to the people. I can't really say specifically. I've been struggling in my mind to like say that, okay, they have been part of negotiations. Hell no, they haven't. They created a commission or a committee, and they called it the Committee for Illegally Exported Goods, which is just, first of all, very crazy. And the committee hasn't met officially, I think, so they haven't even started calling communities to come and, talk about their cases. Just, this question is going to get me angry. This question is going to get me angry. They're not doing as much as I would have loved them to do. I would have loved the Cameroon government to be more proactive. I would have loved the committee created to handle restitution to be less diversified as they are, but to be a group of people who are relevant to the conversation. We have this commission that I think it has people from Ministry of Justice, from Ministry of Economy, Finance, Town Planning, just from every ministry. And in my mind, I'm like, if you ask them, what is restitution? So the committee basically doesn't have anybody from academia, but the academia is the one space that sets the base for this conversation. All the historians, the researchers, the anthropologists, the sociologists, all these people are just so very important to help the government make their case. Otherwise, they will go on the table from a begging end. And I already see that happening. That makes me sad. Hi, everyone. This is Sylvie Njobati, and I want to encourage everyone out there to keep watching Poised in 5.